A millionaire farmer finds an injured pilot in his field. He saves her without knowing who she is. But when he looks into her eyes, he realizes he loved her before they ever met. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Noah Miller rose before dawn, as he had nearly every morning for the past decade, and stepped onto the wide porch of his rustic yet spacious home. At 38, with broad shoulders and a neatly trimmed beard, he looked every bit the robust farmer who had achieved financial success. Out in the distance, the first rays of sunlight revealed neat rows of wheat stretching toward the horizon. Though the land glowed gold, there was a quiet weight in Noah's green eyes that refused to leave him. As the sky brightened, he pulled on his worn leather boots, preparing himself for the day's inspection. Moving through the fields, Noah admired the crops shimmering under the gentle light. The subtle rustle of wheat in the breeze reminded him of stability, a welcome contrast to the turmoil that lurked in his memories. The farmland had once belonged to his parents, James and Elizabeth Miller, both lost in a tragic car accident 10 years ago. Their old photograph lay in his office, always face down. He told himself it was to protect it from dust, but in truth, the sight of their smiles felt like a reminder of everything he had failed to prevent. He paused to examine a new irrigation system installed just last week. Thanks to his meticulous planning and a knack for business, the original 200-acre inheritance had grown into 800 acres of prime farmland near Cedar Falls, Iowa. He was known locally as a millionaire farmer, though the term made him uncomfortable. Money, as he saw it, never cured loneliness. It simply offered more efficient ways to disguise it. While reviewing yield projections on a clipboard, he heard a rumble from Frank Wilson's old pickup truck. Frank, at 62, was weathered from sun and labor, yet stood with a ramrod-straight posture that suggested a distant military past. He tipped his hat in greeting. "Morning, boss," Frank said. "Fields lookin' mighty fine." Noah grunted agreement, slipping the clipboard under his arm. Frank stared a moment too long, concern flickering behind his gray eyes. "Harvest's gonna be good," he added gently, "but you still might want to step off the farm every now and then. Get some fresh perspective." Noah offered a polite smile but said nothing. A group from the local Chamber of Commerce had invited him to a social event that evening, a fundraiser for the Cedar Falls Community Center. He glanced at the slip of paper pinned to his fridge earlier that morning. It might have been a decent opportunity to mingle with neighbors or perhaps meet new friends, yet he already planned to decline. Ever since the accident took his parents, gatherings felt hollow. He preferred the solitude of spreadsheets and fields. By mid-morning, Noah crossed to the far edge of his property, where the wheat gave way to a dormant strip of land he'd left untouched. As he walked, he recalled the twisted metal of his parents' car. They had been driving home from a weekend trip when a drunk driver veered across the median. That day, Noah had felt powerless, and the feeling had stayed with him since. Taking control of the farm became his mission. If he could manage every detail here, maybe he'd never have to feel that helpless again. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. The voice on the line introduced itself as a real estate broker, inquiring if Noah might be willing to sell a portion of his western fields. Apparently, someone with substantial resources had been quietly buying parcels of farmland in the area. Noah ended the call firmly. His father had always insisted that the land was precious beyond its monetary value. Selling even an acre seemed unthinkable. That evening, as dusk painted the sky with coral and lavender tones, Noah retreated to his back porch. He gazed at the stars beginning to glimmer overhead, the same constellations his father once pointed out. Somehow, the bright pinpricks only deepened his sense of solitude. A gentle wind stirred the wheat, making him wonder if his restlessness was a passing breeze or a sign of something bigger. He leaned against a wooden post, silently admitting that, though his world seemed orderly, part of him was waiting for a change he couldn't yet name. 2 days later, Noah drove into Cedar Falls for a monthly meeting at the old agricultural cooperative. The building, made of red brick, stood like a relic from a bygone era. Its tall windows bore the dusty marks of decades of storms. Inside, local farmers gathered in a plain room with a creaking wooden floor and the familiar smell of coffee and fertilizer. A sense of unease hovered in the air, overshadowing the usual small talk about weather patterns or planting techniques. "We've got rumors of a conglomerate buying up land all over the county," said Michael Green, a barrel-chested man of 57. His face, reddened by years in the sun, turned grim as he recounted how he had just sold his property. "The offer was too good to refuse," he explained, shifting uncomfortably. "They paid more than double what I expected." A ripple of concern passed among the other farmers. Noah said little, but his mind worked quickly. He recalled the unsolicited phone call he had received, the one he cut short. If the pattern continued, who might be behind these purchases? Though he'd built a robust agribusiness, the thought of an unknown corporate entity swallowing the fields around his own unsettled him. After the meeting, he headed to Wilson's Supply, a cramped shop that smelled of freshly cut leather and herbicide. He needed a new set of tractor belts and wanted to check on a special fertilizer mix. While waiting in line, he noticed Claire Morgan, a 45-year-old nurse with chestnut hair faintly streaked with gray. Her hazel eyes softened when she spotted him. Claire had grown up with Noah, and though they were never close friends, their families once shared Sunday potlucks. "You've been a ghost lately," Claire teased lightly, tapping him on the shoulder. "I haven't seen you in town except for these co-op meetings." Noah shrugged, non-committal. Small talk wasn't his strong suit, and yet Claire's warmth felt oddly comforting. "You should come by the clinic sometime," she suggested. "Not that I think you need medical attention, but maybe my niece could use some, I don't know, company." Noah cleared his throat, politely declining without saying the words. He sensed that Claire was only trying to help. Stepping back outside, he glimpsed a small aircraft circling overhead, its engine whining in a peculiar rhythm. He squinted, following the plane's path as it dipped slightly, then stabilized. An uneasy flutter passed through him. Ever since he was a boy, he'd found solace watching planes trace arcs across the sky. His father, an engineer before turning to farming, had owned a few old aviation manuals that Noah still kept. The sound of that plane overhead now filled him with an inexplicable tension, as if it might be carrying some message he wasn't ready to hear. That night, after returning to his farm, he fell into a restless sleep. He dreamed of his parents standing in the midst of a storm. They tried to speak, but he couldn't hear their words over the roar of thunder. He jolted awake, heart pounding, a thin layer of sweat on his brow. Something about the dream felt like a warning, although he couldn't decipher its meaning. The following morning dawned bright, but the atmosphere remained charged. Noah's phone buzzed with updates from fellow farmers, each echoing the same concern. Land was being bought left and right by faceless investors. Even Claire texted him a link to a short news piece about Hargrove Airlines making corporate moves across the Midwest, though the exact nature wasn't specified. Standing on his porch with a mug of coffee, Noah stared over the rolling fields, feeling a tension he couldn't name. The wheat rippled in the breeze like waves on an endless ocean, and for a moment he wondered if he should do more than watch. Change was coming, and he wasn't sure if he was prepared to face it. Rain fell in steady sheets for nearly the entire day, soaking the fields and turning the farm roads into muddy tracks. Noah leaned against the window in his office, a large room where stacks of papers, financial ledgers, and farm schematics were arranged with almost obsessive neatness. Through the glass, He saw the murky outline of the tractor barn and the faint silhouettes of cows seeking shelter. The downpour felt claustrophobic, mirroring the swirl of anxiety growing inside him. He had spent the morning revisiting old property documents, verifying everything was secure. He wanted absolute proof that no one could coerce him into selling. Yet the rumors he heard at the co-op rang in his mind like a warning bell. His parents had once faced pressure to sell their land. He recalled them discussing it around the dinner table years ago. They'd always refused. Now, that same question knocked at his door with newfound urgency. Around midday, Frank stepped into the office, droplets of rain rolling off his jacket. "Weather's not letting up," Frank said, shaking his head. "We need to check the lower east fields for flooding." Noah nodded absent-mindedly, his gaze fixed on a framed photograph that lay face down on the desk, the last family picture taken before the fatal accident. Frank's eyes followed Noah's. "You know, boss," Frank said gently, "holding on to memories is good, but you don't have to carry them all alone." Noah bristled, turning away to watch the rain. "I'm fine," he muttered. He knew Frank meant well, but it felt easier to push people away than to confront the raw emptiness left by his parents' passing. It was the same impulse that made him deny any outside invitation, social gatherings, or even casual dinners. It was as if the farm had become both his fortress and prison. By late afternoon, he couldn't ignore the rising water any longer. He ventured out in his pickup to the remote corner of the property where a narrow creek threatened to overflow. Parking near the site of a small memorial cross, a marker placed by locals for the accident, though it wasn't the exact location, he stepped into the rain. The sky was slate gray, the thunder distant but rumbling. Each step felt heavier, as if he were treading through layers of old sorrow. He tried to recall that terrible day, the phone call, the rush to the hospital, the finality in the doctor's voice. He had replayed it endlessly, searching for a way he could have changed the outcome. With water reaching the edge of his boots, he gazed at the cross. "Mom, Dad," he whispered, his voice lost in the storm. "I'm keeping my promise. I won't let anyone take this land." Later, back in his office, he rifled through the bottom drawer of a locked file cabinet. He retrieved a faded envelope addressed in his father's neat handwriting. Inside was a letter describing an offer to sell the farm that James Miller had received just a month before the accident. "They want to build something big out here," the letter read. "But the land is more than a commodity." Noah could almost hear his father's baritone, steady and resolute. His phone buzzed with yet another call from a real estate agent. He let it go to voicemail. The tension in his chest grew, a sensation too similar to the helplessness he felt standing by that hospital bed years ago. He forced himself to focus on the tasks at hand: finances for next season, repairs for a barn roof, anything to keep his mind from drifting to the unknown. That night, as the rain finally subsided, Noah found himself unable to sleep. Sitting by a dying fire in the living room, he clutched an old aviation book that once belonged to his father. On its yellowed pages were sketches of small planes and notes in the margins. He wasn't sure why, but flipping through the diagrams brought a muted sense of calm. Eventually, exhaustion claimed him, and he dozed off with the book resting on his chest, dreams of thunder and wings haunting his slumber. A gentle warmth replaced the storm clouds the following week, and sunlight spread across the freshly turned soil. Determined to honor his mother's memory, Noah rose early to plant a field of sunflowers. He remembered how Elizabeth Miller, at 52, had been so passionate about botany that she would roam the countryside identifying wildflowers. Growing sunflowers, she'd always said, was like putting bits of sunshine into the earth. With Frank's help, Noah carefully measured the rows and placed each seed. A sense of reverence pervaded his work. It felt less like routine farming and more like a personal tribute. As he knelt in the soft dirt, he recalled his mother's laughter, light, free, and forever gone. Yet here, in these seeds, he thought he might preserve something of her spirit. By mid-morning, Pastor Robert Jenkins arrived unexpectedly. Tall and lean at 70, with white hair cropped close, he had been a steady fixture in the community for 3 decades. "Heard you were planting a little hope," he said, offering Noah an old photo album. Inside were pictures of local gatherings, including a few of Noah's parents at church picnics. "Elizabeth and James were pillars of our town," Pastor Jenkins murmured, "and they'd be proud of what you've done here." Later, the pastor accompanied Noah to the veranda, where they spoke about the swirling rumors of land sales. Pastor Jenkins frowned. "Times are changing, son," he said. "Folks have a way of chasing whatever profits they see on the horizon. But you have a calling. This farm is part of that calling." Noah nodded, half listening. He appreciated the pastor's encouragement, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. In the afternoon, Claire Morgan stopped by, bringing herbal salves and a plate of homemade oatmeal cookies. Standing in the patchy spring sunlight, she examined Noah's roughened hands. "These might help with any aches you've got," she explained, handing him a small jar. "It's peppermint and lavender, nothing fancy, but it works wonders on sore muscles." He mumbled thanks, feeling an odd warmth at her genuine concern. While Claire was there, she mentioned seeing more light aircraft flying low over the neighboring properties. "Something's up," she whispered. "I just sense it. Maybe they're scouting land." Noah felt a shiver of disquiet. He'd already noticed the unusual flight paths. Now, hearing Claire confirm it tightened the knot in his stomach. Toward late afternoon, Pastor Jenkins showed Noah several photos of James Miller from years back. "Did you know your father once considered a partnership with an aviation group?" the pastor asked. "We never talked much about it," Noah admitted. The pastor shrugged. "He was always dreaming. Your dad wanted to combine engineering, flights, and agriculture so folks could do crop dusting in a new, eco-friendly way." Standing in the half-planted sunflower field, Noah pictured his father with an airplane, sowing seeds or spraying organic treatments from the sky. The image felt oddly comforting, like a bridge between the stable earth he cherished and the limitless sky he sometimes feared. He stared at the dark soil under his boots, imagining bright yellow petals rising toward the sun in a few weeks' time. That evening, he gazed upon the final row of freshly planted seeds. The horizon glowed pink and orange, the air crisp with the scent of damp earth. Claire, before leaving, squeezed his arm gently. "I know you keep to yourself," she said softly, "but the world's bigger than these fields, Noah. Don't let fear keep you from what might be." Left alone in the soft twilight, he touched one of the sunflower seeds pressed into the soil, recalling how his mother would cup her hands around a fresh bloom as though cradling the sun itself. He inhaled the cool air, feeling a flicker of possibility. Perhaps, he allowed himself to think, there was more to life than guarding old promises. A restless wind stirred the newly planted sunflower field that next morning, bending the tiny green shoots that had just begun to peek above the soil. Noah woke to an unsettling forecast on the radio. Storms were forming to the west, and meteorologists expected them to sweep across Iowa by evening. As he prepped his machinery for high winds, he couldn't shake the sense that something else, something bigger, was bearing down on him. He spent the better part of the day fortifying his outbuildings, checking barn doors, securing equipment, and ensuring the livestock shelters were sturdy. Frank worked alongside him, occasionally giving worried glances at the heavy clouds piling up in the distance. "Feels like a mighty big one's coming," Frank muttered, gesturing at the sky. "Better prepare for whatever it brings." By late afternoon, Noah took a moment to climb the gentle slope of a small hill on the north side of his farm. From there, He could see the field stretch in every direction, gold and green merging into a horizon now tinged with dark clouds. The wind whipped around him, bringing the taste of rain. He thought of how his father once stood with him on this same hill, teaching him to find constellations on summer nights. That memory made his chest tighten with longing. Straining his eyes, he spotted a lone deer edging along the tree line. It was rare to see one so close in daylight, but there it stood, watching him. The moment felt strangely significant, as if the deer were some silent messenger. Then it darted away, startled by a sound overhead. Noah lifted his gaze to see a small airplane, the same one he'd noticed earlier in the week, wobbling slightly in the strong gusts. The plane's engine sputtered in a troubling way, and it seemed to dip lower with each pass. His heart clenched in alarm. Something was off. He was sure of it. The pilot appeared to be circling, looking for a place to land. But out here, the only open spaces were farmland, many with rough terrain not meant for planes. He quickly scanned the skyline. The storm clouds rumbled, lightning flickering at their edges. A pang of urgency shot through him. He scrambled down the hill, fumbling for his phone. His mind raced with what to do if that plane actually went down. Memories of his parents' accident flashed like lightning in his head, fueling his determination. For years, he had felt powerless about their fate, but now maybe he could do something to help someone else in jeopardy. Reaching his truck, he heard the crackle of thunder. The wind had picked up significantly, sending dust swirling in little tornadoes across the yard. He peered up through the windshield, trying to locate the aircraft. A sudden glint of metal caught his eye. The plane was lower now, definitely struggling to maintain altitude. His heart thumped hard as he started the engine. Could he guide the pilot to a safer landing spot? The field of sunflowers he'd just planted was partially open, but the soil was still soft from the recent rain. It might not be the best choice, yet it was one of the few places free of large obstacles. Another roll of thunder made him grit his teeth. Time was running out. He pressed the gas, barreling along the farm road that cut between his wheat fields and the sunflower patch. With each jolt of the truck, he glanced up at the plane, which now dipped dangerously close to the tops of the trees. As the wind whipped in violent gusts, he caught sight of the aircraft tipping sideways. A surge of instinct pushed him onward. This was it, a collision of heaven and earth about to unfold right on his land. He skidded to a halt near the freshly planted sunflowers, leaping from the truck. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the plane's descent. Noah's heart pounded with a fierce mixture of fear and resolve. Without hesitation, he dashed toward the open field, the wind roaring in his ears. He didn't know the pilot or why they flew here, but a conviction flared inside him. He would do whatever was necessary to help. As the plane drew closer, engines sputtering in protest, Noah braced himself for impact, feeling as if his entire life had been leading him to this single, defining moment. The wind tore across the farmland with relentless force, whipping Noah's jacket as he sprinted toward the crumpling aircraft. Its left wing grazed the top of a newly planted sunflower row, stirring up a cloud of dust and shredded stalks. The plane skidded awkwardly through the soft soil before coming to a jarring halt. For a moment, there was only the howl of the wind and the angry rumble of thunder behind it. Noah's heart pounded. Adrenaline coursed through his veins as he rushed to the mangled cockpit, rain slicing sideways across his face. The plane's propeller, now bent and silent, gave off a faint trail of smoke. Peering through the cracked windshield, he could see a figure slumped over the controls. Without a second thought, he yanked the cabin door, but it refused to budge. A lightning flash illuminated the pilot's silhouette, a woman, her short, dark hair matted with blood near her forehead. Noah felt a bolt of panic. The handle finally gave, and the door sprang open with a metallic groan. Moving carefully, he reached in. "Ma'am!" he yelled over the wind. "Can you hear me?" She was unconscious, her uniform shirt soaked in rain and dotted with flecks of mud. He fumbled for her seatbelt, hands trembling, the clasp released, and he eased her upright. A crack of thunder made him flinch, but he steadied himself, refusing to abandon his task. With her weight slumped against his chest, he maneuvered her out of the wreckage and into his arms. She felt frighteningly limp, though he could sense the faint movement of her chest. Stepping away from the twisted fuselage, Noah realized just how vulnerable they both were. The storm wasn't letting up. If anything, the thunderheads overhead had darkened. Another flash of lightning revealed the broad expanse of farmland around them, the seedlings flattened by the plane's rough landing. Gritting his teeth, he carried the pilot toward his truck, feet sinking in the saturated soil with every step. Gently placing her in the passenger seat, he reached for his phone. The local cell towers crackled with intermittent service, but he managed to call Claire Morgan, the town's most trusted nurse. "Claire, it's Noah," he said breathlessly, fighting the wind. "I've got an injured pilot at my place. Plane went down in my field. She's unconscious." Claire's voice came through, tense but steady. "Bring her inside and keep her warm. I'll head there as soon as I can. The roads might be flooded." Noah ended the call and hit the accelerator, the truck's tires spinning against the mud before catching traction. Rain pelted the windshield. His gaze flicked from the road to the silent figure beside him. In the sporadic glow of headlights and lightning, he could see her features more clearly. Late 20s or early 30s. A strong jawline, a thin scar along her chin. There was something about her face that stirred a flicker of recognition he couldn't place. As he pulled up to the house, Frank Wilson appeared on the porch, his expression alarmed. Together, they carefully lifted the pilot from the truck, hurrying inside while thunder shook the windows. The interior lights flickered with each bolt of lightning. Noah cleared off the long couch in the living room, laying her down with caution. Her breathing sounded shallow. A nasty gash above her temple had bled into her hair. He pressed a clean towel to the wound, pulse thudding in his ears. "Stay with me," he murmured. Frank fetched blankets while Noah stoked the fire in the stone fireplace, the warmth offering a fragile counterpoint to the chaos outside. Each flash of lightning cast fractured shadows across the room. Glancing down at the pilot's face, Noah noticed something startling. Even in unconsciousness, her expression held a quiet determination, and though he'd never met her, a strange certainty pulsed through him. Somehow, he felt he knew her. Moments later, a new surge of rain lashed at the windows, but Noah barely heard it. He was focused on the woman's faint pulse, the rhythmic sign that she was still hanging on. "Help's coming," he whispered, unsure if she could hear. Deep inside, an old fear rose. He'd lost people he loved before, and he vowed not to let it happen again. When Claire Morgan finally arrived, her hair damp from the storm, the power had already flickered out. Only the glow of oil lamps and the crackling fireplace lit the living room. The pilot remained unconscious on Noah's couch, her breathing shallow but steady. Claire immediately went into action, examining the gash on the pilot's temple and checking for any fractures. "She's stable for now," Claire announced after a quick assessment, "but she needs rest, and we'll want to monitor her vitals closely." Head injuries can be tricky. Her voice was calm and measured, though the set of her jaw revealed concern. Noah hovered at the edge of the couch, his anxiety evident. He kept replaying the plane crash in his mind, remembering how he forced open the cockpit door. Each time, the memory came with an unsettling jolt, like fate had just intervened in his carefully isolated world. "Thank you for coming," he muttered, trying to sound composed. Claire smiled gently. "I've seen worse accidents, but the next 24 hours are critical." She looked around, noting the flickering lamp and the old aviation book lying half open on the table. "We might not have hospital-level conditions here, but with enough care, she should pull through. Frank helped gather supplies, a basin of water, extra blankets, and a small medical kit kept in the house for emergencies. Claire stitched the cut on the pilot's head by the soft lamplight. Every so often, the thunder outside rattled the windows, reminding them all of the storm that continued to batter Cedar Falls. As minutes stretched into hours, Noah found himself alone with Claire in the dimly lit kitchen. She was rinsing out used gauze when he confessed, "I don't even know her name. All I have is a flight jacket in the truck, but there's no ID on it." Claire pressed her lips together in thought. "Could you find anything else at the crash site?" "No," he said quietly. "Just a small duffel bag with some clothes. Nothing that tells me who she is or why she was flying." Claire nodded, and they returned to the living room. The pilot stirred, her eyelids fluttering. For an instant, Noah thought she might wake, but she fell back into a restless unconsciousness. He noticed her hands, calloused, with short nails, as though used to practical work. A faint bruise was forming on her left wrist. Outside, the rain began to subside, but the power remained out. With the hush of the storm's retreat, the house grew eerily quiet. Claire decided to spend the night, worried about leaving the pilot in this condition. Frank retreated to the barn to keep an eye on the animals, giving Noah and Claire space to manage the situation indoors. Around midnight, a sharp crack of lightning struck somewhere nearby, causing the pilot to jerk awake with a startled gasp. Noah rushed to her side, heart pounding. Her eyes opened for just a moment, clear blue, yet glassy with pain. She tried to speak, but only managed a faint whisper. He leaned in, catching only a fragment of sound. "Please, help." Claire kneeled by the couch and soothed her. "You're safe. You had a crash, but you're in good hands." The pilot grimaced in pain, then slipped back into unconsciousness. A wave of relief and worry washed over Noah. He'd never felt such urgency to protect someone he didn't even know. There was a nagging sense in the back of his mind, an inexplicable familiarity about her features. It didn't make any rational sense, yet it lingered. As the house settled into an uneasy calm, Noah pulled a chair close to the couch. He found himself studying the faint freckles across the pilot's nose, the curve of her cheek. Time seemed to slow under the lamplight. He wondered who she was, what brought her flying over his property, and why the sight of her ignited a longing he couldn't quite define. Outside, the last remnants of the storm rumbled away, leaving a stillness as thick as the night. Eventually, Claire drifted into the guest room to catch some sleep. But Noah stayed, unable to tear his gaze from the sleeping stranger, someone who felt oddly like a friend he'd lost, but only just met. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the windows, a striking contrast to the previous night's tempest. The living room remained warm from the fireplace's dying embers. Noah had barely slept, though he couldn't remember feeling this alert. He hovered near the couch, heart pounding with anticipation. At last, the pilot stirred again. Her lashes fluttered, and she blinked against the bright rays. Slowly, her gaze focused on Noah, who stood a short distance away. Claire rushed in from the kitchen, relief evident in her eyes. "Take it easy," Claire advised softly, kneeling beside the couch. "You've had quite a night." Confusion played across the pilot's features. She tried to sit up, but Claire gently urged her to remain still. That's when her gaze flicked to Noah. Tall, broad-shouldered, beard neatly trimmed. She seemed to study him for a moment, a question forming in her blue eyes. Noah's voice emerged softly. "You crashed on my property. You were unconscious when I found you." He swallowed the lump in his throat, unsure why he felt so affected by her attention. "My name's Noah Miller." The pilot inhaled slowly. Her voice, though faint, carried a determined edge. "Carol," she managed. "Carol Hargrove." The name fell quietly, but Noah caught it. Claire offered a sip of water, and Carol took it gratefully, her hand trembling. "How do you feel?" Claire asked, checking her pulse. Carol closed her eyes momentarily, wincing. "My head throbs. Everything feels heavy." She struggled to piece her thoughts together. "I remember there was a mechanical issue, then the storm." Her eyes flicked back to Noah. You got me out of there," he nodded. "I did what anyone would." A faint pink touched his cheeks, unusual for a man usually so stoic. "Your plane was going down fast. I'm just thankful I saw you in time." For a moment, Carol's face softened, as though she wanted to say more. Instead, she glanced around. The living room had wide windows overlooking fields, where the sun now revealed fresh mud and scattered debris from the crash. "Where exactly am I?" "Cedar Falls, Iowa," Noah replied. "This is my farm. I run an organic agribusiness here." He paused, uncertain if he should delve into more detail. Part of him wanted her to know everything about him, but he couldn't explain why. Carol lifted a hand to her bandaged temple, her fingers tracing the stitches Claire had put in. "Is the plane—" she began, then faltered. "It's in rough shape," Claire supplied gently. "You're lucky to be alive." She gave Carol a measured look. "We don't know if you have any fractures or internal injuries, but from what I can tell, you're stable. Would you prefer we arrange transport to a hospital?" Carol hesitated, eyes darting away. Noah noticed a flash of something, fear maybe, or guilt. "No," she said hastily, "not yet. If I can just rest here a couple of days, I should be okay. I'll see about the plane later." Noah and Claire exchanged glances. Neither pressed the issue. Something about Carol's apprehension signaled that she wasn't eager to involve official channels yet. "We have a guest room you can use," Noah offered quietly. "It's more comfortable than the couch." A flicker of relief crossed her face. "Thank you. I appreciate that. Noah." His name rolled off her tongue like a tentative promise. As they helped her stand, her knees wobbled. Noah slipped an arm around her waist to steady her. A jolt of recognition coursed through him at the contact, as if he had known her embrace 1,000 times before. She glanced at him with equal parts gratitude and curiosity. "Easy does it," Claire murmured, leading the way to the room rarely used. The hallway walls displayed photos of wheat fields in summer, old family moments Noah hadn't taken down. Carol's gaze flicked to a picture of James and Elizabeth Miller. She opened her mouth to ask, but decided against it. Once Carol was settled on the bed, a new hush fell over the house. Noah lingered in the doorway, his pulse still racing from that inexplicable sense of déjà vu. She managed a small, exhausted smile. "Thanks for everything." "You're welcome," he said softly. Then he left, feeling a strange pull to stay. In her eyes, he had seen something he couldn't fully name, something that made him want to protect her and unravel the mystery of why he felt he already knew her. Over the next few days, Carol gained strength, though she moved gingerly around Noah's home. While the bruise on her forehead darkened and the stitches remained tender, she insisted on exploring the farm, stating that a bit of fresh air would help. Claire grudgingly agreed, but warned her to take it slow. It was late morning when Noah found Carol on the back porch. A soft breeze carried the scent of wet earth, and a slice of sunshine bathed the steps where she sat. She wore a borrowed flannel shirt, clearly one of Noah's, and a pair of jeans Frank had scrounged up. The slightly oversized clothing made her look simultaneously vulnerable and determined. "No one's expecting you to wander around," he said, half scolding, half teasing. "You should be resting." She glanced up, shielding her blue eyes from the sun. "I've rested enough, and I've never been one to stay still." She tested a smile, then nodded toward the wide expanse of farmland. "I heard you talking about your fields. Thought maybe you'd show me around." Her request caught him off guard. Apart from Frank or the occasional farmhand, almost no one spent time walking the property with him. Still, he realized how much he wanted to share it with her. "Sure," he said, tamping down a surge of pleasure he found hard to explain. He led her across the yard, pointing out the wheat fields first. They were resilient, still standing after the storm. Even in its early stages of regrowth, the wheat shimmered under the sun. Then they made their way toward the sunflower field, now partly damaged from the crash, but dotted with new sprouts pushing stubbornly through the soil. Carol's gaze traveled the rows of emerging green. "You planted these for a reason, didn't you?" He hesitated, surprised by her insight. "Yes. My mother loved sunflowers. She passed away a while ago." His voice grew quiet. "Planting them felt like a way to keep her memory alive," Carol nodded, gently touching a sprouting stalk. "They're tougher than they look. They'll still bloom." For a moment, her tone held a wistful note, as if speaking from personal experience. They walked on, pausing at the wreckage of the downed plane. Twisted metal lay half buried in the dirt, a stark reminder of her near-disastrous landing. Carol's expression clouded. "I need to figure out how to move it, but I'm short on resources right now, and, well, there's a reason I haven't rushed to call the insurance company." Noah didn't pry, but curiosity churned inside him. Instead, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We can take it slow. I know people in town who might help. No questions asked." She glanced back at him, gratitude in her eyes. "Thanks." Then, with a forced brightness, she changed the subject. "So what else do you grow here?" Noah relaxed, describing the organic methods he used to cultivate wheat, corn, and soybeans. He spoke about the specialized irrigation system he'd developed, balancing efficient yields with ecological responsibility. To his surprise, Carol followed every detail with genuine interest. She even asked pointed questions about sustainable crop rotations and market pricing, questions that suggested she knew more about agriculture than he would have guessed. They circled back toward the main barn, where Carol noticed a small workshop off to one side. Stepping inside, she found half-finished wooden furniture and shelves lined with tools. "You make these?" She ran a finger along a smooth chair arm, craftsmanship evident in the detail. A shy pride flickered in Noah's eyes. "It's a hobby, something I picked up after..." His voice trailed off. "After everything." Carol took in the wood shavings on the floor, the faint smell of varnish. "They're beautiful," she murmured. "Shows you care about each piece." He gave a small shrug. "It's comforting to create something from raw material, to shape it into something useful and lasting." They exchanged a moment of understanding. Outside, the sun shone brightly, and the breeze carried a hint of warmth. Carol looked away, a shadow crossing her face as though she remembered something she couldn't share. In response, Noah wondered what secrets she carried. Eventually, they returned to the house for a simple lunch Claire had prepared. As they passed the field of sunflowers once more, Carol paused to watch the tiny buds quivering under the wind, fighting to grow against the odds. Noah stood beside her, and for a moment, the world slowed. Something unspoken yet profound seemed to blossom between them, something both were afraid to name. In the days that followed, Carol and Noah fell into an easy routine, unexpected yet comforting. She spent her mornings recuperating and her afternoons helping with light tasks around the farm, sorting tools, organizing supply cabinets, or simply observing how Noah managed daily operations. Claire kept a watchful eye on her stitches, cautioning against overexertion. It was a bright Tuesday afternoon when Carol discovered Noah at the memorial site where his parents' car accident had once been remembered. The small marker was tucked behind a stand of oak trees near a bend in the dirt road. She approached quietly, not wanting to intrude, but he turned and nodded a silent welcome. Kneeling, Noah cleared away a few fallen branches, revealing a weathered plaque bearing the names James and Elizabeth Miller. "I haven't shown this place to anyone in years," he murmured. "Couldn't stand looking at it, to be honest." Carol lowered herself beside him. Her head still felt tender, but her concern for him outweighed the discomfort. She studied his face, those green eyes that reflected both defiance and sorrow. "You're allowed to grieve, you know," she said softly. He exhaled, the breath trembling. "I tried to bury it all in work. But recently, I don't know. Everything's been shifting. I can't ignore the memories anymore." They lingered in silence, each lost in thought. Eventually, Noah's voice broke through. "What about you? You said you were flying for personal reasons, but that doesn't explain everything. You clearly know a thing or two about farmland and—" "About bigger business." Carol's gaze fell to the ground. She pressed her lips together before responding. "I'm a commercial pilot, but I also have a stake in, well, in a major airline. It's complicated." She glanced around, as though the trees might be listening. "I just needed to get away from that world for a while, clear my head." Noah sensed a deeper story there, but he waited, letting her reveal only what she was ready to share. The breeze rustled the oak leaves overhead, and for a moment Carol closed her eyes, inhaling the clean scent of freshly tilled earth. "It's nice here," she said, almost to herself, honest, grounded. He nodded. "It's what I love about this place. The land tells the truth." He hesitated, then added, "Sometimes I think I was meant to do more. My father wanted to combine aviation and farming in some new, sustainable way. I found some notes he wrote a long time ago, but I never pursued it. I guess I was afraid of change." They rose and walked back toward the barn, discussing the possibility of eco-friendly crop dusting methods, or how small planes might be adapted for fertilizer distribution without harming the soil. Carol's eyes lit up. "You know, there's a growing market for that sort of innovation." He offered a half smile. "Maybe, but I'm not sure I have the resources or the know-how." Carol paused, resting a hand on a wooden railing. "You have passion for this land. Sometimes that's more valuable than any investment capital." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, they found themselves sitting on the roof of an old tool shed, watching the stars emerge. Carol's bandaged forehead itched a little, but she ignored it, transfixed by the clear Iowa sky. "Where I come from, the nights don't look like this," she admitted, hugging her knees. "City lights drown out the stars." Noah handed her a blanket. "My dad taught me all the constellations, even gave me an old telescope one Christmas." He pointed out a cluster of stars overhead, naming them in a hushed tone. Carol leaned closer, her shoulder brushing his, an unspoken question in her eyes. "It's ironic," she said softly, "that I've spent so much time in the air, but I never really noticed the stars like this." The closeness of the moment made Noah's pulse quicken. He felt the warmth of her presence and the gentle rise and fall of her breath. Something in the darkness called to him, a possibility that hadn't existed before. "Sometimes," he said, his voice low, "we find what we need when we weren't even looking." In that quiet space, it seemed their unspoken stories, their past traumas and their hopes for the future, intertwined like roots and wings bound together. There, under the vast, luminous sky, both of them wondered if life was guiding them towards something they had never dared to imagine. 1 week later, the skies over Cedar Falls began to darken again, but this time the clouds carried a different kind of storm, one of rumors and pending decisions. Carol's health had improved significantly. The bruises on her temple had faded, and she moved with a renewed sense of purpose. Yet Noah sensed a tension beneath her calm exterior, like a bird ready to take flight at any moment. He found her one afternoon, seated in the office, flipping through local newspapers stacked on his desk. Articles about farmland acquisitions and corporate takeovers dotted the pages, each more alarming than the last. She looked up, catching his gaze, and her expression was grim. "Noah, these buyers, do you have any idea who they might be?" His jaw tightened. He thought of the phone calls he kept rejecting, the brokers who wouldn't take no for an answer. "I'm not sure exactly, but it's the same group making offers all around the county. They're playing hardball. Neighbors are receiving huge checks." Carol nodded slowly, chewing her lip as if weighing her next words. "If it's who I suspect, they might be connected to certain corporate alliances, possibly even my family's company." Noah's eyes widened. "Your family's company? You mean the airline?" She sighed, glancing away. "It's more complicated than just an airline. My father, he's been looking to expand into areas beyond passenger flights, cargo, infrastructure, even large-scale real estate. Airports need space, and farmland often seems like an easy target." Her voice quivered with a mix of frustration and regret. "I was hoping to talk him out of it." A prickly dread sank into Noah's chest. "Talk him out of what? Building a new airport here?" "It's possible. Or an air freight hub, maybe." She tossed the newspaper onto the desk. "I only saw glimpses of the plans before I left on that flight. I couldn't agree with it. I wanted a different direction for our company, something more sustainable. We clashed." Her face was shadowed by regret. "I took the plane alone because I needed space to think. Now it seems I've landed right where the fight is about to happen." A wave of conflicting emotions struck Noah. Anger, betrayal, but also an aching sympathy for the burden Carol carried. His mind flashed to the memory of her battered plane, how he felt an instant need to save her. "So this land, my land, might be on the chopping block," he said quietly. Carol looked up, her blue eyes filled with genuine remorse. "Noah, I promise you, I had no idea your farm could be part of these acquisitions. And even if I did, I'd never—" Her voice trailed off. "I don't want to see Cedar Falls turned into a giant runway. This place deserves more respect." They stood in tense silence, the swirl of their unspoken connection colliding with the practical realities of a corporate machine. Finally, she reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "We don't have to let it happen," she said, her tone determined. "I have enough influence, or at least enough knowledge, to propose an alternative." His gaze flickered with hope. "An alternative?" Carol nodded. "Something that blends aviation with farmland without destroying the community. You've got the farmland expertise, and I've got the aviation background. Maybe we can present a plan that preserves the land while modernizing the airline's operations in a green way." He stared at her, the tension slowly giving way to a cautious optimism. "It sounds ambitious," he admitted. A faint smile curved her lips. "Ambitious, yes, but I think we have to try." Before they could speak further, Frank appeared at the office door, clearing his throat. "Noah, there's a lawyer here. Says he represents a real estate firm looking to make a deal." He looked from Carol to Noah, anxiety plain on his face. "They're waiting outside." In the sudden quiet that followed, Carol slipped her hand away, straightening her shoulders. "Showtime," she said under her breath, steeling herself. Noah nodded, heart thumping. The storm had indeed arrived, and it carried the force of corporate power. But as he led the way outside, a strange resolve crystallized within him. If there was any hope of protecting his home and the future he'd begun to imagine with Carol, he'd face this challenge head-on. They stepped onto the porch to find a bespectacled lawyer holding a sheaf of papers. the sky darkening behind him. Carol and Noah exchanged one final glance, both aware that everything was about to change. Thunder rumbled ominously in the distance as Noah escorted the lawyer out, the exchange having been brief but tense. The man offered a formal, too polite smile and left a glossy folder with documents outlining an irresistible purchase offer for Noah's farm. Rain threatened but didn't yet fall, leaving an odd heaviness in the summer air. Inside, Carol was pacing the length of the living room, every muscle taut with worry. She looked up as Noah entered, eyes flicking anxiously to the folder he carried. The tightness in her shoulders told him she feared what came next. He set the papers on a side table and turned toward her, searching her expression for some hint of reassurance. "You're certain your father's behind all this?" Noah asked, voice low. He'd heard her mention Thomas Hargrove before, but now the pieces were clicking into place. He remembered a moment days earlier when he'd glimpsed a flight tag with the name Hargrove etched onto it. Carol met his gaze, her cheeks flushing. "Yes," she answered quietly. "Thomas Hargrove is my father. I'm Carol Hargrove. Our company is expanding into large real estate ventures, airports, freight hubs, you name it." Noah exhaled, feeling the pang of betrayal and confusion knot together in his gut. He recalled the night he'd found her ID badge stuffed into a side pocket of her flight jacket, confirmation that she was far more than just a commercial pilot. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" She ran a hand through her short dark hair, wincing slightly as her bandaged temple protested. "I was afraid," she confessed, her voice unsteady. "The day we crashed, when you rescued me, I realized how badly my father's deals were going to affect places like this. But I never imagined it would be your land specifically." Her eyes shone with regret. "I wasn't ready to face what that meant for us, or for you." Silence stretched, broken only by the faint creak of the house settling. Noah studied her face. The same face he had watched in unconscious repose just weeks ago, filled now with such raw vulnerability. "I can't say this doesn't hurt," he began, "but I also can't ignore what's grown between us since that plane fell out of the sky." Carol swallowed, her expression a mixture of relief and sorrow. "Noah, I never wanted to deceive you. Once I started recovering here, being near you, seeing how you love this place, I wanted to protect that. I wanted to believe there was a way to save your farm without tearing apart my family." He glanced at the glossy folder, remembering the lawyer's smooth reassurances about progress and economic opportunity. The numbers inside were eye-popping, enough to tempt many landowners. But he thought of his parents, their refusal to sell, and the sunflowers he'd planted in honor of his mother. "Money isn't everything," he said quietly. "If it were, I wouldn't still be here." A crash of thunder made Carol jump. Instinctively, Noah reached for her hand. He could feel the tremor in her fingers, and maybe she felt the tremor in his too. "I found your flight tag," he admitted, voice trembling just enough to reveal his own turmoil. "I knew your last name for a while now. I just needed you to tell me." Tears brimmed in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "You've known all this time?" He nodded. "Not all the details, but yes, I suspected, and I still wanted to help you." Carol's face softened, relief mingled with regret. "I do have a plan," she whispered, "one that could change the entire approach to farmland and aviation. We can fight this. It doesn't have to end in a bulldozer coming through your fields." A flicker of hope sparked in Noah's chest. He thought of the diaries his father left behind, the scribbled notes about aviation-driven sustainability. Perhaps, together, they could give those old dreams new life. "Then let's do it," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "I knew you before your surname, and I'm not walking away now." Outside, The sky flashed with lightning, and the wind began to howl. But standing there, hand in hand, they felt more solid than ever, united in a purpose that had just become crystal clear, no matter the storms ahead. By the next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the air crisp with renewed possibility. Carol and Noah rose early, gathering in the farm's office, papers, laptops, and notes strewn across the wooden desk. A single lamp illuminated their makeshift command center while dawn light seeped in through the wide windows. Over hot coffee, they pored through reams of data. Carol produced a worn folder of research she'd compiled while working for Hargrove Airlines, studies on fuel-efficient engines, sustainable runway designs, and even agricultural collaborative airports in Europe. Noah brought out a battered journal belonging to his late father, filled with sketches and ideas for eco-friendly crop-dusting planes. "This is incredible," Carol remarked, flipping through the old pages. "Your dad was way ahead of his time. He even wrote about using alternative biofuels for small aircraft." Noah nodded, a hint of pride shining in his eyes. "He once told me that if we could grow what powers the planes right here on the farm, we'd never rely on anyone else. After the accident, I let all that go." Carol gently laid a hand over his. "Let's bring it back. We can combine these ideas with modern aviation tech. Show the board at Hargrove Airlines there's a profitable way forward that doesn't involve destroying farmland." He inhaled slowly. "We'll need a real proposal, something polished, with clear financials. It can't just be a dream. It has to be viable." Carol's lips curved into a determined smile. "I've spent years sitting in corporate strategy meetings. I know how these people think. If we can present them with revenue models, market projections, maybe we can pivot their interest from building an airport to partnering on green innovation." They worked side by side for hours, turning Noah's office into a hive of activity. Frank occasionally peeked in, offering words of support or bringing fresh coffee. Claire dropped by with snacks and a dose of encouragement. "I can't pretend to understand half of what you're planning," she admitted with a laugh, "but I can see it matters a lot. Keep at it." Afternoon sunlight spilled across the scattered documents, warming the space. Carol, lost in concentration, scribbled calculations on a yellow legal pad. "If we convert a portion of these fields for biofuel crops, corn or soybeans, specially refined for sustainable aviation, then we could set up a pilot program for new engine prototypes. That means jobs for the local community, plus a test site that Hargrove Airlines can brag about in PR statements." Noah looked thoughtful, tapping his pen on the desk. "We could also incorporate my father's blueprint for a smaller airstrip, just enough for test flights, not a commercial hub, something that coexists with the existing farmland instead of replacing it." Their excitement built as they imagined a synergy of earth and sky. They volleyed ideas back and forth, adjusting numbers, pausing to check references in both Carol's corporate files and James Miller's meticulous sketches. Time slipped by. They hardly noticed when the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the wheat fields outside. At one point, Carol paused, her gaze drifting to the orchard visible through the window. Her voice dropped. "My father, Thomas, he won't be an easy sell. He's tough, and he hates changing course once he's made a plan," she sighed. "He also wants a guaranteed legacy for the Hargrove name, and in his eyes, that's expansion at any cost." Noah set down his pen. "We can't force him to see reason, but we can give him a compelling alternative." He placed a gentle hand on Carol's shoulder. "And if that fails, we still stand for what's right." She searched his face. "I don't want to lose you or this farm to a boardroom decision," she confessed, voice barely above a whisper. He leaned closer, pressing his forehead lightly to hers. "We won't let that happen. Together, we'll show them a different path." With renewed resolve, they returned to their work, shaping a shared vision that might just unite two worlds long kept apart. Although the task felt daunting, they knew they'd found something worth fighting for, something that merged the unwavering roots of farmland with the daring wings of aviation. 3 days later, Carol stood by the makeshift helipad that Frank had hastily cleared near the western edge of the farm. Her bruises had faded to faint yellow shadows, and her eyes held a mixture of resolve and apprehension. Noah was at her side, arms folded over his chest, watching the horizon. They heard the thumping rotors before the helicopter appeared, a glossy black machine cutting across the sky, sent by Thomas Hargrove to collect his daughter. She glanced at Noah with a tightening in her chest. "Guess that's my ride." He reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "I wish I could go with you." The truth was, Carol had insisted on heading back to corporate headquarters alone, at least for the initial steps of the negotiation. She needed to set the stage, to soften her father's defenses. Noah would follow if and when the situation called for it. The helicopter landed in a swirl of wind and dust, and a pilot in a crisp uniform slid the door open. Carol turned to Noah, heart pounding. "We'll finalize the main proposal with them in a few days. Once I see how receptive Dad is, I'll call you to come present your part." Noah nodded, his green eyes betraying a flicker of concern. "Don't let him corner you into any quick decisions. We have a plan, remember?" She nodded, then did something neither expected. Rising on tiptoe, she placed a soft kiss on Noah's cheek. "I'll be back," she murmured, "with or without his blessing. But let's hope it's with." His lips curved in a half-smile. "I'll be here. Just be careful." Carol climbed into the helicopter, nodding at the pilot, a man named James Roberts she recognized from various corporate flights. He offered no more than a polite nod, eyes trained ahead. In a matter of seconds, the craft lifted, blotting out Noah's figure as it gained altitude. She gazed down at the fields spreading beneath her, the neat rows of wheat and the patch of sunflowers in bloom, battered but standing. For a flicker of time, she recalled the near-fatal crash that started all this, a strange twist of fate that led her to a man who understood the earth the way she understood the sky. As the farm shrank in her view, Carol felt a pang of longing. She clutched the folder of their joint proposal tighter against her chest. This wasn't just about saving farmland. It was about forging a future that belonged to both her and Noah, one that integrated everything they valued. Hours later, she touched down on the helipad atop Hargrove Tower, a glinting skyscraper in a bustling urban center. The stark contrast to the farm rattled her nerves, and she braced herself for the meeting that lay ahead. Her father's top-level office, perched on the 40th floor, offered panoramic windows showcasing a cityscape of concrete and steel. No fields, no open sky, just the constant hum of traffic below. Thomas Hargrove was there, standing behind his massive desk, silver hair meticulously groomed. At 65, he cut an imposing figure, a man accustomed to commanding rooms with a single glance. He turned, his eyes sweeping over Carol. "You look well," he remarked, though his tone lacked warmth. "I'm relieved you've recovered from your adventure." She forced a small smile. "I'm grateful for the rescue, and I'm here because we need to talk about the farmland acquisitions you've set in motion." His expression stiffened. "I see you've come back with an opinion." "Well, let's hear it. Although, as you know, we're quite far along in negotiations. The land in Cedar Falls is key to a major expansion." Carol held the folder close, inhaling to steady herself. "I have a plan to repurpose that land in a way that supports our airline without destroying the community. A plan that could revolutionize how we handle sustainability, Father." Thomas Hargrove tilted his head, assessing her carefully. "Fine," he said, voice measured. "You have 10 minutes to convince me." Her heart pounded. She thought of Noah standing by the fields, trusting her. Gritting her teeth, she stepped forward. 10 minutes is all I need. Back in Cedar Falls, Noah arrived at the local community center for an emergency town meeting. Word had spread that the mystery conglomerate linked to Hargrove Airlines, though few knew the full story, intended to purchase critical farmland. Tensions ran high as farmers and townspeople filled the worn wooden chairs in the large hall. The overhead lights buzzed softly, and the smell of instant coffee mingled with anxious murmurs. A makeshift stage at the front held a single lectern. Noah was scheduled to present an alternate plan, a bold move for a man who'd spent the last decade avoiding public speaking. Yet, as he scanned the concerned faces, he realized there was no going back. Meanwhile, in a sleek corporate boardroom miles away, Carol stood before a row of executives, including her father. She clicked through slides that illustrated a cooperative effort between farmland and aviation, each bullet point emphasizing profits through innovation rather than displacement. Her voice was steady, polished from years of observing corporate pitches. Yet every so often, her mind flashed to Noah, hoping his own presentation was going well. At the community center, Noah cleared his throat, the microphone squealing slightly. "Good evening," he began, nerves tightening his voice. "My name is Noah Miller. Some of you know me, and some of you only know I've expanded my family's farm over the years." He paused, gripping the edges of the lectern. "I'm here to tell you there's another way, a way to preserve our land, our jobs, and our way of life." The audience was cautious, but they listened. Frank nodded supportively from the front row, Claire by his side. Noah detailed how farmland could be partnered with an airline for research on sustainable aviation fuel and ecological technology. He acknowledged the skepticism but pressed on, brandishing diagrams Carol had helped refine. "We can become pioneers in a new agricultural aviation model rather than victims of a giant land grab." At Hargrove headquarters, Carol finished her presentation, aware of the silence that followed. Every seat at the long glass table was filled by stoic board members, eyes flicking from her to Thomas Hargrove. He exhaled slowly, folding his arms. "Your plan is interesting, Carol, but this is bigger than environmental goodwill. We have shareholders to satisfy, and they demand measurable returns." She held her ground, and that's exactly what this proposal offers. We could secure grants for green innovation, open new revenue streams from eco-conscious partners, and broaden our public image as a leading airline in sustainable aviation. It's not charity, it's future-proofing our entire operation. An older board member, Eleanor Richmond, gave a thoughtful nod. "I'd like to see more data on those potential grants. It could be a game-changer if the projections hold." Thomas's gaze swept the room, sensing a split in the board's reactions. Some members appeared intrigued, others hesitant. "We've already invested heavily in the Cedar Falls site for a traditional airport. A pivot like this is risky," he warned, eyes narrowing at Carol. She inhaled, meeting his stare. "No risk, no reward, right? Isn't that how you built Hargrove Airlines in the first place?" In Cedar Falls, Noah wrapped up his speech with a heartfelt plea. "This land is more than soil. It's our heritage. We're not against progress. We just want to be part of it on our own terms." A hush fell as he finished. Then, one by one, farmers who had long respected Noah's quiet diligence stood and clapped. It wasn't a roar of acceptance, but it was a start. At that same moment, Carol closed her laptop in the boardroom, the corners of her lips lifting in relief. She felt the smallest glimmer of hope. Turning to her father, she said, "You once taught me that real leadership means daring to see beyond what's right in front of us. That's what I'm asking this company to do now." Thomas's expression remained unreadable, but Carol didn't back down. Both in that corporate tower and in the rural town hall, two parallel struggles took shape, each driven by the love of land and sky. Though half a state apart, Carol and Noah reached the same silent conclusion. They were fighting the same battle, each hoping the other would prevail. A week later, Noah stood in the heart of his sunflower field, now dotted with sturdy green stalks crowned by small, bright faces. Though parts were damaged in the crash, new growth pushed through, a testament to resilience. Frank and Claire had helped replant sections flattened by the plane, and the blossoms were coming in just in time for a crucial visit. Thomas Hargrove had agreed to see the farm for himself. "They'll be here any minute," Frank noted, nodding toward a distant line of sleek SUVs making their way down the gravel road. A few local reporters were also present, camera crews setting up to capture the billionaire mogul's visit. Claire offered Noah a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "You've done everything you can. The demonstration sites are ready, and you've got the support of the community." He scanned the area. Wooden signs showing how farmland and aviation research could coexist, small test plots for special biofuel crops, and even a rundown of projected earnings from a collaboration with Hargrove Airlines. It was all carefully staged to highlight the viability of the plan he and Carol had labored over. As the SUVs parked, a small entourage of corporate executives emerged. Thomas Hargrove stepped out last, tall and silver-haired, wearing a crisp suit that seemed out of place in the dusty farm environment. Carol was beside him, dressed more casually, but the tension in her posture betrayed the emotional weight of this moment. Noah approached, extending a polite hand to Thomas. "Mr. Hargrove," he said, voice steady, "thank you for coming." Thomas shook his hand with restrained courtesy. "Mr. Miller, I'm here to see what my daughter's been working on so passionately." His gaze swept the field, lingering on the half-bloomed sunflowers. "She claims there's a future here worth saving." "I believe there is," Noah answered simply. They moved through the demonstration, stopping at each display that highlighted how farmland technology could support new aviation ventures. Carol and Noah took turns explaining the data, referencing both James Miller's old notes and Carol's corporate insight. Occasionally, executives would murmur approval. Other times, they'd scribble notes or exchange skeptical glances. Near the end of the tour, Thomas paced across a patch of ground designated for a potential airstrip. "This would be a test runway?" he asked, eyeing the farmland around it. "Not for commercial flights?" Noah nodded. "We only need something small for R&D purposes, test flights with new engines, eco-friendly fuel. This approach lets us keep the majority of the fields intact." Thomas ran his hand along a sample wing component displayed on a wooden table. "I see," he murmured, "and you believe the revenue from these R&D partnerships can match or exceed what a larger commercial airport would bring." Carol stepped forward. "We do, especially long-term. Market trends show growing demand for sustainable solutions. If Hargrove Airlines becomes a leader in eco-aviation, it's a chance to capture a market before competitors catch on." She paused, glancing at Noah. "It would also preserve a community rather than dismantle it." A flicker passed over Thomas's face, something akin to recognition or maybe regret. "So the farmland remains, and we adapt our plans," he said, almost to himself. Reporters snapped photos of the exchange, the camera shutters clicking in rapid staccato. The group moved on toward the sunflowers, where a gentle breeze set the bright petals nodding. With the day's light slanting across the field, the scene was unexpectedly picturesque, corporate suits among yellow blooms. Thomas hesitated, plucking a single sunflower that hung over the path. He studied it, then turned to Noah. "It's not what I initially envisioned," he said quietly. "But I can't deny it's compelling." Carol's eyes shone. "Thank you for giving it a fair chance," she ventured. Thomas held the sunflower stem thoughtfully. "I've made no promises yet, but I won't dismiss it." He exhaled, shoulders relaxing slightly. "Let's reconvene with the investors. We'll see if we can reach an agreement that satisfies both the board and my daughters." Convictions. Noah exchanged a hopeful glance with Carol, feeling the first stirrings of relief. The tide hadn't fully turned, but at least it was shifting. Together, they led Thomas and the entourage back toward the vehicles, hearts pounding with the realization that everything hung in the balance, and that, for the first time, it felt possible to see sky and earth unite for good. Sunrise brought a brilliant glow to Cedar Falls, gilding the wheat fields in a rich, golden hue. An unusual flurry of activity hummed across Noah's farm. Trucks, vans, and a handful of luxury sedans peppered the dirt driveway, kicking up small clouds of dust as they arrived. Representatives from Hargrove Airlines and various investors had traveled to see the final, formal presentation of Noah and Carol's vision. Local media crews set up cameras near a temporary platform facing the gently rolling fields. Noah stood at the edge of his sunflowers, inhaling the crisp morning air. He could hear voices carrying across the farm, reporters interviewing local farmers, executives murmuring about the schedule, technicians testing microphones. The big day felt both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. His heart thumped a steady rhythm of anticipation. He glanced toward the farmhouse, where Carol was finalizing last-minute details with Claire and Frank. Thomas Hargrove arrived in a sleek black car, stepping onto the gravel with measured composure. His silver hair glistened under the bright sun, and he surveyed the surroundings as if assessing whether this rural scene truly deserved the corporate attention. Carol approached him, offering a formal handshake that softened into a more personal greeting. Their relationship, while still guarded, seemed warmer than it had been in years. Soon, a hush settled over the makeshift stage. Noah, wearing his best collared shirt and a calm facade, stepped forward to address the assembled crowd. Carol stood at his side, her short dark hair framing a determined expression. She wore a light blazer, an attempt to bridge her corporate roots and the farmland that had claimed her heart. Thomas and several other executives settled in front-row chairs, poised to listen. "Good morning," Noah began, voice projecting clearly through the sound system. He introduced himself, spoke briefly of his parents' legacy, and then presented a broad overview of the farmland's history. Carol took the mic next, describing the airline industry's growing need for sustainability. Their words intertwined, weaving a story of how farmland and aviation could thrive in tandem rather than competing for space. A large screen displayed slides with financial projections, potential grant programs, and environmental impact studies. Now and then, murmurs rippled through the audience, some impressed, others skeptical. Noah felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple, but Carol's calm confidence helped ground him. When the formal presentation ended, a panel of investors and board members asked pointed questions. An older man in a grey suit demanded specifics on ROI timelines. Another, wearing stylish glasses, probed into the logistics of maintaining farmland while operating test flights. Carol answered with precision, drawing on her corporate experience. Noah supplemented with on-the-ground practicality, explaining how crop rotation could be adapted for biofuel production. Thomas Hargrove waited until the end to speak, his rich voice cutting through the chatter. "The concept is undeniably innovative," he acknowledged, "yet our shareholders demand clear profitability within a reasonable time frame. Can you guarantee that?" Carol met his gaze, refusing to waver. "We can show strong returns within 3 to 5 years, especially if we secure partnerships with government programs supporting green aviation." We'll not only avoid negative publicity from displacing local communities, but we'll also position Hargrove Airlines as a leader in next-generation, eco-friendly air travel." A hush fell. Noah glanced around, noticing that many in the crowd seemed intrigued, hopeful even. Thomas tapped his fingertips against his seat's armrest, expression unreadable. "We've heard a compelling argument," he said at last, "but big decisions require more than just good ideas." Before anyone could lose heart, one of the top investors spoke up. "I like what I'm seeing. This is the sort of forward-thinking approach the industry lacks. I'd be willing to support a pilot program." A chorus of cautious agreement followed, as other investors nodded or voiced hesitant approval. Thomas stood, the crowd's attention snapping back to him. "Let's continue these discussions in detail this afternoon," he declared. "If the numbers check out, we can determine the terms of a partnership." As the meeting closed, the audience dispersed for a short break, heading toward refreshment tables beneath a large canopy. Noah exhaled, meeting Carol's gaze with a small, relieved grin. While nothing was set in stone, they were closer than ever to forging a new path, one where fields of sunflowers and advanced aircraft could coexist under an open sky. After the presentation, the farm buzzed with a different energy, one that felt more optimistic, as though the morning sun had illuminated new possibilities. A modest reception had been arranged in the old barn, tables lined with local fare, sweet corn, homemade pies, and pitchers of lemonade. Some of the suits from the city exchanged cautious smiles with the local farmers, each side curious about the other. Noah and Carol mingled near the entrance, greeting neighbors and executives alike. Claire oversaw the refreshments, her nurse's practicality extending to handing out slices of apple pie with warm efficiency. Frank was nearby, proud as could be, occasionally stepping in to chat about equipment or planting schedules if an investor looked intrigued. At one point, Carol slipped away from a group of well-wishers and found Noah outside near a stack of hay bales. The barn's open doors framed the vibrant fields behind him. Her heart skipped a beat at the sight of him, tall, strong, yet visibly relieved from the tension of the morning. For a moment, neither spoke, but the shared look passing between them said enough. "You did great," Carol finally said, her voice soft. She stepped closer, the scent of hay mingling with the faint perfume she wore. "I was watching the crowd. People genuinely believe in this idea." He ran a hand over the back of his neck, a modest gesture. "I couldn't have done it without you. You tied everything together in a way they could understand." Pausing, he gazed out at the field of half-open sunflowers. "I never thought I'd be standing here, presenting anything to a corporate board. Used to think my life was just these rows of wheat and a ledger." She gently touched his shoulder. "Fate can be funny." The sincerity in her eyes pressed a lump into his throat. Ever since that crash, something indescribable had grown between them. It felt deeper than mere circumstance, as if they had been on a collision course long before her plane ever came down. Turning, Carol led him away from the barn to a quieter spot near a row of young maples. Their leaves fluttered in the afternoon breeze, offering dappled shade. From the barn's open doors, they could still hear the din of conversation, but it felt private enough for an honest word. "Noah," she began, swallowing hard, "I need you to know something, even if everything fell apart with the negotiations. Even if my father refuses the deal, I wouldn't walk away from us." He blinked, surprised at how directly she'd voiced the unspoken question hanging between them. "This is more than a business partnership," he said quietly. "I know. I feel it too." Her closeness reminded him of the night she woke on his couch, how he'd felt inexplicably protective of her. That desire to protect had only grown, but it had been joined by something more profound, love. Her expression softened, relief evident in her exhale. It's been so intense these past few weeks. Crash landings, corporate battles, my father's looming presence. But in spite of all that, or maybe because of it, every day I've spent here with you has felt like a blessing I never expected. Noah reached for her hands. I'm not a man who's been quick to trust or easy to love, not since my parents died, but you've changed something in me, Carol. He hesitated, heart pounding. I'm not sure how to put it into words yet, but I know you're part of my life now. I can't imagine this farm without you. Tears shimmered in her eyes, though her smile was radiant. Impulsively, she leaned in, and their lips met in a gentle, unhurried kiss. The barn's distant chatter receded, and for that suspended moment, it felt like they were the only two people in existence. Earth and sky seamlessly joined. When they pulled apart, the sound of applause drifted over. A few bystanders had ventured outside, catching the tender scene. Frank let out a hearty whoop, and Claire nudged him in mock scolding, though her grin was as wide as his. Blushing, Carol buried her face against Noah's chest. He laughed softly, pressing a kiss to her hair. I guess the secret's out. Let them talk, she whispered, an unshakable warmth filling her voice. We've got bigger things to accomplish. As dusk settled over Cedar Falls, a more formal negotiation took place inside Noah's home, which had been temporarily converted into a conference space. The large wooden dining table now held stacks of legal documents, financial models, and laptops. Thomas Hargrove, still impeccably dressed, examined the files with a calculating eye. Carol stood beside him, arms crossed, tension radiating from her posture. Noah sat across from them, flanked by two local attorneys who had volunteered to help represent the town's interests. Papers rustled and pens tapped against the table as the group pored over every clause. Outside, the western sky blazed in shades of orange and crimson, the last of the day's sunlight winking across the farmland. Eleanor Richmond, a senior board member from Hargrove Airlines, cleared her throat. I must admit, this proposal is thorough. I see the potential for sustainable revenue streams, especially with the current climate incentives. However, we need to address the upfront costs for R&D and the timeline for ramp-up. Carol nodded, flipping to a chart. We've accounted for that, allocating capital expenditures over an 18-month period, with projected break-even by year 3. Government grants for green technology can offset a large portion of the research costs. Thomas studied the chart in silence. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, regarding Noah with an unreadable expression. Your father had big dreams, it seems, he commented, tapping a finger on a page from James Miller's old journal. I never met him, but from what I've heard, he was a visionary of sorts. Would have been interesting to see you partner with him on this, had life gone differently. A pang of grief knotted in Noah's chest, but he kept his composure. I like to believe he's still here in spirit, guiding us. This land meant everything to him. Sighing, Thomas closed the journal carefully, as though sensing its emotional weight. A flicker of vulnerability crossed his face, and he pressed a hand briefly to his chest before continuing. It's an intriguing proposal. I'm not opposed to innovation. I built my career on it. But I also have a responsibility to our shareholders, and I won't jeopardize Hargrove Airlines for sentiment's sake. Carol placed a gentle hand on her father's shoulder. We're not asking for sentiment, Dad. We're asking for a partnership that could open the airline to a whole new market. You've always taught me to look ahead, not just at the next quarter, but the next decade. He eyed his daughter, an internal battle etched in his features. Then he cleared his throat. Eleanor, let's talk real numbers. If we commit to a pilot program in Cedar Falls, how soon can we evaluate success? Eleanor answered, flipping through her notes. Within 6 to 9 months, We'll have initial data on engine prototypes and crop yields for biofuel. At that point, the board can decide whether to expand or pivot. The local attorneys chimed in, reiterating how the farmland would remain under partial ownership of Noah's agribusiness, ensuring the community retained its heritage. Investors would hold stakes in the research facility and any resulting patents for sustainable aviation tech. Thomas listened, occasionally asking pointed questions, but his usual combative edge seemed subdued. Once or twice, he rubbed his left shoulder and winced, though he tried to hide it. Carol noticed concern tightening her eyes. "Dad, you all right?" He waved her off. "Just a twinge, old man's body complaining, nothing more." A tense hour passed as they refined contract language and hammered out contingencies. When at last they reached a tentative agreement, an undercurrent of relief mingled with lingering caution. It wasn't a done deal. Official signatures and final board approvals were still needed, but it felt like a significant step forward. Gathering the papers, Thomas rose with a measured sigh. "All right, I'll present this to the rest of the board. Provided the financial committee signs off, I see no reason we can't move forward on a trial basis." Noah's shoulders dropped with exhaustion, but a tentative smile graced his lips. "Thank you, sir," he managed. Thomas glanced around the room, his gaze settling on Carol. "We'll see how this plays out. It's something new for all of us." For a moment, the mask of the corporate titan slipped, and the father underneath looked at Carol with a flicker of pride and worry. "I trust you'll keep me informed of any developments on site." Carol nodded. "I will," she promised softly. He gave a curt nod and headed for the door, aides and lawyers trailing behind. Once the vehicle's headlights disappeared into the night, Noah and Carol stood in the quiet foyer, hearts pounding from the enormity of what had just transpired. They'd taken a bold leap toward uniting farmland and aviation, forging a delicate bridge between Cedar Falls and the high-flying world of Hargrove Airlines, and they'd done it together. In the weeks that followed the tentative agreement, the farm evolved into a patchwork of progress and planning. Contractors arrived to survey potential locations for a small test runway. Scientists from Hargrove's research division visited to take soil samples, analyzing the viability of specialized biofuel crops. Even local carpenters, Noah's longtime acquaintances, pitched in to retrofit part of the barn into a workspace for the new tech team. Carol and Noah spent most of their days overseeing this bustle of activity. Clad in sturdy boots and denim, she consulted with a structural engineer while Noah discussed crop rotations with an agronomist. Despite the seriousness of the work, an undercurrent of excitement buoyed them through the challenges. Whenever their paths crossed, a quick shared smile or gentle touch reminded them why they were doing all this in the first place. One golden afternoon, Noah and Carol stepped away from the busyness, taking a walk through the orchard at the far end of the property. The apple trees there weren't yet in season, but the promise of future fruit hung in the air. Carol reached up to brush a few blossoms, her eyes turning pensive. "I'm supposed to meet Dad in a couple of days," she said, "to review the final cost breakdown for the research facility." Noah nodded, plucking a stray leaf from her hair. "Think he's warming up to the idea?" She pursed her lips. "I think he's cautious, but not hostile. That's progress." Then her expression darkened momentarily. "He also mentioned seeing his doctor next week. Apparently, those pains in his chest and shoulder have been worse. He won't talk about it, of course." A pang of sympathy passed through Noah. Thomas Hargrove was far from his favorite person, but he understood how fear and pride could intertwine. "Let's hope it's nothing serious," he murmured, guiding Carol toward a nearby bench. "And if it is, let's hope he'll let you be there for him." They sat quietly for a moment, the orchard's branches swaying in a gentle breeze. In the distance, They could see the silhouette of farmhands milling about, preparing new irrigation lines for the test plots. Everything felt on the brink of transformation, as though the farm and their lives were both in a phase of delicate reinvention. "So, about us," Carol began, lacing her fingers through Noah's. "We've been so focused on merging farmland and aviation, I feel like we haven't talked about how we merge our lives." He turned to face her fully, his green eyes earnest. "We'll figure it out. If you need to be in the city part-time, or if the airline needs you to travel, we'll adjust. I'm not leaving this land, Carol, but I'm willing to compromise." A tender smile curved her lips. "Me too. I'm not giving up flying. It's in my blood. But that doesn't mean I can't be here with you, building this vision." She drew in a breath, feeling the weight of her next words. "I want a future with you, Noah. Not just a plan or a project. A real life, side by side." His gaze softened, and he reached into the pocket of his jacket. "I've been meaning to give you something." From his palm, he produced a small wooden figurine, a sunflower carved with meticulous detail. Atop its petals perched a tiny airplane, wings outstretched. "I've been working on it in the evenings," he explained, cheeks warming with a hint of shyness. "A reminder that sky and earth can meet in harmony." Carol's eyes glistened, and she closed her hand around the figurine. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." He looked down, then met her gaze again. "I'm serious about us. I know it's soon, but I can't imagine letting you go now that I've found you." She leaned in, brushing her lips against his. "Then don't," she murmured, voice trembling with emotion. "Because I'm not going anywhere." They held each other, orchard breeze wrapping them in a moment of peace amid all the changes swirling around them. In the hush of that late afternoon, it felt as if they'd taken another step toward something lasting, an unspoken vow that no contract or corporate deal could overshadow. The orchard blossoms fluttered, scattering tiny petals around them like a gentle blessing. Weeks later, the day arrived for the formal signing of the pilot program agreement. Noah's farm bustled with final preparations. Chairs lined up in neat rows facing a long table, where official documents awaited signatures. The air carried a festive buzz, with reporters snapping photos and local farmers gathering to witness the moment. Cedar Falls had never seen such a convergence of big city executives and rural families, all intermingling under the broad Iowa sky. Thomas Hargrove arrived early, accompanied by a small entourage of board members. He looked more tired than before, but a determined glint shone in his eyes. Carol hurried to meet him, checking on his well-being with a quiet murmur. He nodded, brushing off her concern, but Noah noticed the subtle way Thomas gripped his daughter's arm for support. The ceremony began just after noon. Eleanor Richmond, the senior board member, sympathetic to Carol's cause, welcomed everyone, commending the innovative spirit that had brought them to this day. Then, one by one, representatives from Hargrove Airlines, local government officials, and Noah himself added their signatures to the official contract. Each scratch of a pen felt momentous, like seeds being planted for a future harvest. Cheers and applause erupted when the final signature was inked. Cameras flashed, capturing the handshake between Thomas and Noah, once adversaries, now cautious partners in a bold experiment. Noah breathed a silent prayer of thanks, thinking of his parents' dream that farmland could be more than just acreage to be bought and sold. A light reception followed, under a large white tent erected near the sunflower field, where the flowers stood in their full summer glory. Tables draped in linen held platters of fresh fruit, local cheeses, and pitchers of sweet tea. Soft conversation and the clink of glassware filled the tent, a pleasant hum of celebration and relief. When the formalities settled, Carol slipped out of the tent, heading toward the sunflower field. Sensing something in her expression, Noah followed, catching up to her among the tall, golden blooms. Their wide petals turned toward the sun, a testament to resilience and optimism. The stems rustled in the gentle breeze, forming a living corridor around them. Carol turned, a curious mixture of excitement and nervous energy lighting her features. "I just needed a quiet moment," she explained, her voice subdued. "After all the chaos, it's like I can finally breathe." Noah nodded, taking in the vibrant sea of yellow that surrounded them. "I feel the same. Though I still can't quite believe we pulled it off." He glanced back at the tent, faintly visible over the bobbing sunflowers. "We've got the best chance I've seen to protect this land and develop something truly revolutionary." She drew closer, lifting her gaze to meet his. "What about us?" she asked softly, the breeze teasing a few strands of her dark hair. "We have so many responsibilities now, new roles, more people counting on us. Does that change?" "Anything?" A warm smile curved Noah's lips. "If anything, it cements what I already knew, that I want to build a life with you. I don't care if it's half in the air and half on the ground. I just want it to be together." Her heart fluttered at his words, and then, surprising even herself, Carol reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. A silver ring, simple but elegantly crafted. Her cheeks flushed with color. "I've been carrying this around for days, trying to find the right time." Noah's eyes widened. "What?" She held the ring out, voice trembling with emotion. "Let's not wait, Noah. Let's choose each other now, openly. I know it's unconventional for the woman to do the asking, but then again, nothing about us has been traditional from day one. Will you marry me?" For a split second, time seemed to stand still. The sunflowers, the breeze, even the distant murmur from the tent faded into background hush. Noah felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, joy surging through him. He covered her hand with his own. "Yes," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. 1,000 times yes. A delighted laugh escaped Carol, and she slipped the ring onto his finger, though it was a slightly snug fit. "We might have to resize it," she joked, tears glimmering in her eyes. He pulled her into a tight embrace, heart pounding so fiercely he thought it might burst. When they finally separated, the sight of the sunflowers stretching out around them reminded Noah of how life could blossom in the most unexpected ways. There, among the brilliant yellow petals, they sealed a promise to walk forward as partners, in business, in love, and in an uncharted future where farmland and sky intertwined under the warm Iowa sun. The first crisp days of autumn rolled in, ushering a time of both hard work and quiet reflection on Noah's farm. The pilot program agreement was well underway, and the newly formed Cedar Falls Aviation Research Center began taking shape. Modular buildings sprang up at the edge of the fields, housing labs and offices where engineers tinkered with test engines designed to run on sustainable fuels. Every day seemed to bring another delivery truck or a new specialist eager to be part of the groundbreaking venture. Amid all this activity, life for Noah and Carol settled into a new kind of rhythm. Sometimes she needed to be in Chicago or New York for Hargrove Airlines board meetings. So she'd kiss Noah goodbye in the early dawn and board a small company plane from their new makeshift runway. Other times, she stayed put on the farm for weeks, knee-deep in soil samples or data reviews. Whenever she returned, she and Noah fell into each other's arms as though they'd been apart for months, their bond growing stronger with each challenge they navigated together. With autumn's arrival, the once golden fields of wheat had been harvested, and the sunflowers' bright heads bowed with mature seeds. Noah watched each stage of the season with a sense of gratitude he hadn't known before. The land, always precious, now felt even more alive under the combined care of agricultural workers and aviation researchers. Technology coexisted with tradition, forging a fragile but hopeful balance. Carol, for her part, learned to split her days between spreadsheets and tractor rides. She'd wake early to check corporate emails, then spend late afternoons riding along with Frank to inspect irrigation systems or tag along with Claire, who remained the unofficial caretaker for everyone's minor aches and pains. In the evenings, Carol and Noah often sat on the porch, wrapped in sweaters against the cooling air, reviewing the day's progress. Over cups of spiced cider, they'd talk about everything from new hybrid seed trials to the next steps for the airline's sustainability push. One windy afternoon, Thomas Hargrove arrived unannounced, surprising them both. He looked thinner, cheeks hollow, though he moved with determined composure. Carol rushed out to greet him, concern evident in her eyes. "Dad, you should have called." "We could have picked you up at the airstrip." He waved her off, gently straightening his coat. "I needed to see how things are going here, and I wanted to do it without a crowd of executives trailing behind." His gaze swept the transformed landscape. Engineers testing prototypes near one field, farmers cultivating the next. The corners of his mouth tightened briefly. "I'll admit, it's impressive." They walked the property, Carol pointing out how certain test plots were devoted to soybeans genetically suited for biofuel, while adjacent rows remained for food production. Noah explained the new irrigation systems, referencing notes from James Miller's journals. Thomas nodded attentively, though every so often he'd pause to catch his breath, leaning discreetly on a fence post. Finally, they settled on the farmhouse porch, warm mugs in hand. Thomas accepted a blanket Carol draped over his shoulders. He glanced at the sun dipping behind distant hills. "I had a doctor's appointment last week," he said quietly. "The diagnosis isn't ideal. My heart's under more strain than I realized." Carol's hand flew to her mouth. "Dad, I had no idea it was that serious." He lifted a reassuring palm. "I'm managing. But it does force me to think about the future, of the company, of this whole venture." His gaze flicked to Noah. "I built Hargrove Airlines from the ground up, but it's bigger than me now. I'm grateful, in a way, that you're here, Carol, to carry it forward, and that you found someone who shares your vision." A hush fell over them, broken only by the rustle of leaves. Noah offered a gentle nod. "We'll do everything we can to make sure this place thrives." "And that the airline thrives with it," Thomas exhaled, weary but resolute. "I know you will." For the first time, he allowed a trace of genuine affection into his voice as he looked at both Carol and Noah. "I'm proud of what you're building. Together." As twilight settled, Carol wrapped her arm through her father's, and Noah quietly slipped his hand around hers. In that moment, the orchard's distant silhouettes and the soft glow of the barn lights seemed to affirm that each season brought not just an ending, but also a promise of renewal for those willing to tend the seeds they'd sown. Winter's chill came and went, giving way to a gentle Iowa spring that hinted at the warmth to come. With it arrived the final preparations for a wedding unlike any Cedar Falls had seen, a fusion of rural traditions and understated elegance that mirrored Carol and Noah's life together. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, the farm buzzed with anticipation. Frank busied himself sprucing up the barns, mending fences, and planting fresh flowers near the entrance. Blair teamed up with a local caterer to plan a menu of home-cooked favorites: roasted corn, fresh-baked bread, fruit pies brimming with ripe berries. Engineers from the aviation center offered to build a decorative archway using repurposed aircraft materials, blending steel curves with wooden beams Noah had carved himself. On the morning of the wedding, Ribbons fluttered from the posts marking the path to the sunflower field, which, once battered by a plane crash, now stood tall and vibrant, a green and gold testament to renewal. Folding chairs were set in neat rows, leaving an aisle that stretched through the flowers. There, at the far end, stood a simple wooden arbor draped with lace and wild blossoms. In the farmhouse, Carol slipped into her wedding dress, a simple ivory creation that hugged her figure and highlighted the faint scar at her temple, a memento of the day her plane fell from the sky. She hardly noticed it now, feeling only the flutters of excitement in her stomach. Claire fussed over her hair, weaving in tiny flowers. "You look radiant," she said, voice trembling with emotion. "Your mother would be so proud." Carol glanced at her reflection in the mirror, heart pounding with equal parts joy and disbelief. Outside the window, the orchard's buds hinted at new life, and a cluster of well-wishers meandered toward the field. She took a calming breath and touched the ring on her finger, the one she'd given Noah months before. "I'm ready," she murmured, eyes shining. Noah, meanwhile, waited near the arbor, wearing a tailored suit that somehow still conveyed his farmer's steadiness. His best man, an old friend from the local co-op, clapped a hand on his shoulder. "You sure clean up nice," he teased, earning a wry grin. But beneath his calm demeanor, Noah's heart thrummed with anticipation. Every so often, he'd glance at the horizon, half expecting to see Carol's silhouette there, as if she might float in on a breeze. A soft guitar melody signaled the ceremony's start. Friends and neighbors filled the chairs, along with a small contingent of executives from Hargrove Airlines who had grown close to the couple. Even Thomas Hargrove arrived, seated carefully in the front row, a slight pallor to his complexion but a proud smile on his face. When Carol finally appeared at the top of the aisle, a collective hush fell over the gathering. She glided through the rows of sunflowers, each step carrying her closer to Noah. He felt tears prick at his eyes, overwhelmed by how naturally she fit into this landscape he'd once walked alone. Their gazes locked, and in that moment, the entire world seemed to tilt, centering on them. Pastor Jenkins, who'd known Noah since childhood, officiated the ceremony with gentle warmth. He spoke of love as a seed that, when carefully tended, could grow stronger than any storm. Carol and Noah exchanged vows they'd written themselves, each referencing the improbable twist of fate that brought them together. Laughter rippled when Carol recounted the day she quite literally dropped out of the sky into Noah's life. Tears glistened when Noah spoke of how she'd reignited a light in his heart he thought was lost forever. As they sealed their union with a kiss, applause erupted amid the rustle of sunflowers. For a time, it felt like the plants themselves swayed in celebration. Carol and Noah turned to face the crowd, hands linked, ready to greet this next chapter. The sun shone brilliantly overhead, and the breeze carried a promise of new horizons. Cedar Falls, farmland, and sky fused into one resonant moment of life-affirming unity, forging a marriage that honored the past while embracing the limitless future. Summer arrived in Cedar Falls with a wave of fresh blossoms, and with it came the day Carol had both longed for and feared, the birth of their first child. The pregnancy had gone smoothly until the last weeks, when sudden bouts of fatigue confined Carol to more rest than she preferred. But Noah, ever watchful, insisted she ease her schedule, no more flying, minimal meetings. For once, Carol agreed without argument, realizing the preciousness of the life growing inside her. One humid afternoon, as thunderheads loomed on the horizon, Carol felt the first twinges of labor. Claire rushed to the farmhouse, her nurse's bag in tow, while Noah nearly tripped over himself, gathering the hospital overnight bag he'd packed and repacked a dozen times. By the time they arrived at the small community hospital, fat drops of rain pelted the windows, echoing the storm that marked Carol's crash so many months ago. Hours stretched into a blur of pain and anticipation. The world narrowed to beeping monitors, hushed voices, and Carol's ragged breaths. Noah stood at her side, gripping her hand with unwavering support, tears gathering at the edges of his eyes whenever he glimpsed her strained expression. Between contractions, she managed to gasp, "This baby sure picked dramatic timing, just like how I arrived in your field." Despite the tension, Noah found a gentle laugh. "I guess it runs in the family." At last, near midnight, a thin cry pierced the hush of the hospital room. Their son entered the world in a flurry of relief and awe, tiny fists balled as though ready to embrace life's challenges. Carol sagged against the pillows, exhaustion mingling with overwhelming joy. When the nurse laid the newborn in her arms, she wept at the perfection of his small features, dark wisps of hair and bright, searching eyes. Noah's breath caught as he bent to kiss Carol's forehead. "You did it," he whispered, voice thick with gratitude. Then he carefully cradled the baby, heart pounding at the fragile warmth against his chest. All the tragedies, the uncertainties, and the battles they'd faced now seemed smaller compared to this new life. In that soft, vulnerable face, they saw proof that the old pain had made room for new blessings. A few hours later, as dawn broke and the storm drifted east, Thomas Hargrove arrived. He walked with measured steps, clearly drained from his own health concerns, but determination lit his gaze. Carol handed the baby to him gently. "Dad, meet James Thomas Miller, named for both our families." Her voice quivered, eyes shining. Thomas's stoic facade cracked. Tears slipped down his cheeks as he studied his grandson, who let out a soft coo. "He's perfect," he whispered, sounding more like a grandfather than a corporate mogul. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between him and Carol, a healing of old wounds and the acceptance of a new legacy. Back at the farm a week later, the community came together for a simple homecoming celebration. Neighbors brought homemade casseroles, warm bread and pies, leaving them at the doorstep before offering well wishes from a respectful distance. Noah and Carol took turns rocking their infant son, whose quiet presence seemed to infuse the house with renewed warmth. One evening, with the baby dozing in a handmade cradle, carved by Noah from the same sturdy wood he used for his sculptures, Carol and Noah ventured outside. They strolled to the sunflowers, many of which now soared above their heads, bursting with color. Lightning bugs flickered at the edges of the field, lending a gentle glow to the summer twilight. Noah held Carol close, pressing a tender kiss to her temple. Their baby's soft breathing was just audible from the cradle monitor, perched on the porch railing. "We have a son," Noah murmured, still marveling at the word. "We have everything we never dared to dream." Carol leaned her head on his shoulder, her exhaustion melding with contentment. "It's more than I ever thought possible," she agreed. As they watched the fireflies dance among the towering blooms, the gentle hum of nearby crickets and the fading warmth of day seemed to echo their relief and hope. Life felt infinitely precious, and for the first time in a long while, neither could imagine the future as anything less than bright. 2 years later, the vibrant fields of Cedar Falls seemed to stretch even wider, carrying memories of all that had changed. The pilot program had officially expanded into the Cedar Falls Eco-Aviation Institute, a thriving center that attracted students and researchers from across the country. Small planes took off from a modest runway, testing new green fuels developed right here in partnership with local farmers. Organic produce continued to flourish, and the synergy between earth and sky was no longer a dream, it was daily reality. On a warm summer afternoon, a graduation ceremony was underway at the Institute. Rows of folding chairs lined the grassy expanse near the runway, and a temporary stage displayed banners proclaiming the success of the first cohort of eco-pilots, engineers, and agronomists. The air buzzed with excitement as proud families clapped for each new graduate who walked across the stage to receive certificates of achievement. Carol, dressed in casual slacks and a light blouse, stood at the makeshift podium, delivering a heartfelt address. Her hair was a touch longer now, but her blue eyes still shone with the same clear determination. "We stand on the front line of an industry that believes flight and farmland can coexist for the betterment of us all," she told the graduates. "Each of you is proof that innovation isn't limited to big city boardrooms or academic labs. It can happen right here, surrounded by wheat fields and sunflower rows." Noah watched her from the sidelines, pride swelling in his chest. Holding their 2-year-old son, James Thomas, affectionately nicknamed JT, he marveled at how fully Carol had embraced her role as both a mother and a visionary leader. The boy squirmed in his arms, drawn by the sight of a small plane parked nearby. "Plane!" JT exclaimed, pointing a chubby finger toward the runway. "Yes, buddy," Noah chuckled, shifting the toddler to his other arm. "That's a plane, just like Mommy's." He couldn't help but smile at how easily their son moved between the realms of earth and sky, a true child of two worlds. When the ceremony ended, applause thundered through the Institute's grounds. Carol hopped down from the stage and crossed to where Noah and JT waited. She scooped JT into her arms, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I think he wants a closer look at that plane," she teased, ruffling his dark hair. Noah nodded, and together they wandered toward the aircraft, a sleek, white single prop designed specifically for testing biofuel blends. Students and faculty milled about, some discussing next steps, others snapping photos. All around, a sense of communal pride rippled through the warm summer air. In the background, Frank chatted with engineers about the best types of cover crops for next season, while Claire offered punch to a group of wide-eyed new graduates. Not far off, Thomas Hargrove sat on a bench beneath a canopy, looking frailer than before, but still every bit the imposing figure he'd always been. A gentle smile softened his features as he watched Carol and Noah approach. JT wriggled free, trotting over to his grandfather with an excited babble. Thomas patted the bench, and Carol sat beside him. "That was a fine speech," he murmured, glancing at her with pride that shone through his fatigue. "Never imagined we'd end up here, but I'm glad we did." She placed a hand over his. "Me too, Dad. Thank you for trusting us when it mattered." They stayed there a moment, a small circle of family in the midst of a larger celebration. JT toddled between them, pointing at the sky where a demonstration flight soared overhead. Noah, standing at Carol's other side, breathed in the sweet scent of sun-baked grass and jet fuel, the curious perfume of a place where two worlds embraced each other. As the day wound down, the three of them, Carol, Noah, and JT, wandered to the crest of a gentle hill overlooking the farm. From that vantage point, they could see everything: the shimmering wheat fields, the orchard bathed in gold, the runway glinting in the sun, and the Institute's hangars off to the side. Overhead, a plane circled lazily, dipping its wings as if in salute. Noah draped an arm around Carol's shoulders, and she leaned into him, JT nestled comfortably between them. In the hush of that late afternoon, they felt a profound sense of peace, a certainty that they'd melded their separate destinies into one shared path. The future stretched before them like the horizon, vast, open, brimming with possibility. They exchanged quiet smiles, hearts full of gratitude. Together, they had transformed sorrow into hope and isolation into connection. Now, as the sun slanted low and the sky blushed with evening hues, they let themselves rest in the knowledge that love had carried them past every obstacle, guiding them to a place where farmland and sky united in a promise of infinite horizons. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.